was at my parents' house fixing their kitchen sink when I found an envelope in the drawer. Dad screamed, "Put that down." I kept reading. Everything. The house, the savings, $740,000, all to my brother. I set the wrench down and left. That was 8 months ago. They just called. "My name's Austin. I'm 34, and I want to tell you about the day I stopped being a good son. Or at least, the day my parents decided I'd never been one to begin with." Let me back up. I grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee. Small brick house on a dead-end street. Kind of place where every neighbor knew your dog's name, but not necessarily yours. My parents, Craig and Lindsay, raised 2 boys there. Me and my older brother Chase. Chase is 37 now, 3 years older, and for most of my life, I would have told you we were close. Not best friends or anything, but close enough. We'd grab a beer every other weekend, talk about football, complain about our wives in the way guys do when they actually love their wives, but need to vent about whose turn it was to load the dishwasher. Normal brother stuff. I'm a plumber. Have been since I was 19. I skipped college because, honestly, school wasn't my thing. I could barely sit through a 45-minute class without feeling like the walls were closing in, so the idea of 4 more years of it sounded like a prison sentence you pay for. I went to trade school instead, got my certification, and started working for a local company. By 26, I had my own small business. Nothing flashy, just me, a van, and a willingness to show up on Saturdays when someone's toilet decided to stage a rebellion. I did okay. Better than okay, actually. I built that business from scratch into something that employs 8 people now. I own my house. I've got a retirement account. My wife Paige and I aren't rich, but we're comfortable, and we earned every inch of that comfort with our own hands. Chase went the college route. Business degree from UT, then an MBA, then a string of corporate jobs where his title changed every 18 months, but his actual responsibilities remained a mystery to everyone, including him. He married Tiffany, who is exactly the kind of person whose entire personality is based on what her kitchen island is made of. Quartz, if you're wondering. She'll tell you. Twice. Chase and Tiffany live in a big house in Franklin, just south of Nashville, and they drive the kind of cars that make you wonder if the monthly payment comes with a complimentary anxiety attack. They look successful. Whether they actually are is a different conversation. Now here's the thing about my family that I didn't fully understand until 8 months ago. My parents always treated Chase differently. Not in a way you could point to and say, "That's messed up." More in the way that water wears down a rock. Slowly, quietly, over years. Chase got the bigger bedroom growing up. Chase's soccer games were the ones Dad never missed, while my wrestling matches were a "we'll try to make it" situation. When Chase graduated college, they threw a party. When I started my business, I got a card and a $25 gift card to a hardware store. Which, look, at least it was relevant, but you see my point. I told myself it didn't bother me. I told myself that parents are human and they connect differently with different kids, and it doesn't mean they love you less. It just means they express it differently. I had a whole internal monologue about it that I'd rehearsed so many times it almost sounded true. And for the most part, I believed it. I had Paige. I had my business. I had a life I'd built from the ground up. I didn't need my parents' approval. I just wanted it. And there's a difference between those two things that'll eat you alive if you let it. So 8 months ago, it was a Thursday evening in September. My parents' kitchen sink had been leaking for about 2 weeks. Mom called me about it 3 times. Not to ask how I was doing, mind you. Not to see if Paige and I wanted to come over for dinner. Just to tell me the sink was dripping and could I come fix it. Because that's what I was to them. Not Austin, their son. Austin the plumber. The guy you call when something's broken. I drove over after work. Still in my work clothes, still smelling like PVC glue and someone's crawl space. Dad was in the living room watching some nature documentary about wolves, barely looked up when I came in. Mom pointed at the sink like I'd never been to their house before and said, "It's the one on the left," and then went back to folding laundry. No hello, no thank you, no offer of a glass of water, just a pointed finger and a dripping faucet. I got under the sink. It was a simple fix. Worn out cartridge in the faucet valve, 10-minute job at most. I needed a specific wrench from the junk drawer next to the fridge, the one that's been stuffed with every random tool, receipt, and takeout menu since about 2004. I opened the drawer and started digging through the chaos, looking for an adjustable wrench I knew was in there somewhere. That's when my hand hit an envelope. It was thick, manila, tucked under a pile of old warranties and rubber bands. The flap was open and I could see there were official-looking papers inside. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it. People keep random documents in junk drawers all the time. But something about it caught my eye. There was a sticky note on the front, and in my dad's handwriting it said, "Updated August, do not lose." August. As in, last month. As in, this was recent. I pulled it out. I shouldn't have. I know that. But something in my gut told me to, and I've learned over the years that your gut is smarter than your brain about 90% of the time. Inside the envelope was a copy of my parents' will. Their full estate plan, actually. Trust documents, asset allocations, property deeds, the whole thing. Stapled together with a cover letter from a law firm in Nashville I'd never heard of. And as I started reading, my hands went still. Everything was going to Chase. And I mean everything. The house. The savings accounts. A brokerage account I didn't even know existed. A piece of property out near Cookville that had apparently been in the family for decades. The total, laid out neatly in a table at the bottom of the summary page, came to $740,000. Every cent of it allocated to Chase Michael Brennan. My name appeared exactly once in the entire document. In a section titled Other Considerations, there was a single line that read, "Austin Craig Brennan shall receive personal effects as deemed appropriate by the surviving trustee." Personal effects. As deemed appropriate. I was getting whatever they didn't feel like throwing away. $740,000. I read it twice because I thought maybe I'd misread it. Maybe there was a second page with my name on it. Maybe there was a separate trust document for me somewhere. I flipped through every page. There wasn't. I was still kneeling on the kitchen floor holding those papers when I heard my dad's voice behind me. Not concerned. Not embarrassed. Furious. "Put that down." I turned around. He was standing in the doorway, and his face had gone the color of a ripe tomato. Mom was behind him, dish towel twisted in her hands, eyes wide like she'd been caught. "Austin, put that down right now." I stood up slowly. I'm 6'1" and my dad is about 5'9", so when I'm standing and he's standing there's a difference. And I think that difference bothered him in that moment more than it usually did. I held the papers at my side and I looked at him and I said the calmest sentence I've probably ever said in my life. "What is this?" Dad's jaw tightened. "That's none of your business. That's a private document. It's got my name in it. One time, in a section about leftover junk. I'd say that makes it my business." Mom stepped forward. She had that look on her face, the one she gets when she's about to rewrite reality in real time. "Austin, honey, you're taking this out of context. There's a lot of nuance to estate planning, and you wouldn't understand the $740,000, I said. "All to Chase. What part of that am I taking out of context?" The kitchen got very quiet. The faucet I'd been trying to fix was still dripping. One drop every 3 seconds, loud as a gavel in that silence. Dad crossed his arms. "Your brother has a family to provide for. He's got responsibilities. A mortgage. Kids coming eventually. He needs the security." "I have a family," I said. "I have a wife. I have a mortgage. I have a business with 8 employees who depend on me." "That's different," Mom said quietly. "How? How is that different?" She didn't answer. She just looked at Dad like she was waiting for him to handle it, the way she always looked at him when things got uncomfortable. "Pass the baton. Let Craig deal with the mess." Dad cleared his throat. "Look, son, you've done well for yourself. You've always been the independent one. You didn't need our help to get where you are. Chase is different. He's had a harder road." I almost laughed. I actually felt the laugh building in my chest, and I had to physically swallow it. Chase had a harder road. The guy with the MBA and the corporate job and the house in Franklin and the wife with the quartz island. That Chase. He had the harder road. "Chase drives a $70,000 truck," I said. "That's not the point. Chase went on a cruise to the Mediterranean last spring. You two helped pay for it. I know because Mom told Paige at Easter and Paige didn't tell me until a week later because she didn't want to start a fight." Mom's face went pale. She hadn't known Paige knew. She definitely hadn't known I knew. "Chase got a down payment on his house from you guys," I continued. $62,000. I know the number because Tiffany bragged about it to Paige's sister at a family barbecue like it was no big deal. Meanwhile, Paige and I scraped together every cent of our down payment by ourselves. I worked weekends for 2 straight years. Paige picked up freelance projects until midnight. We didn't ask for a dime because we thought that's what you'd respect. Turns out what you respected was Chase's ability to ask. Dad stepped closer. "You don't know what you're talking about. Then explain it to me." Explain why Chase gets $740,000 and I get personal effects as deemed appropriate. Explain it like I'm the kid who wasn't smart enough for college. Explain it real slow. That one landed. I saw it hit him right in the chest. Because that's what he'd said to me when I was 18 and told him I was going to trade school instead of university. He'd said, "Well, I guess not everyone's cut out for the academic route." And then he turned around and walked out of the room. No encouragement. No support. Just quiet disappointment wrapped in a sentence designed to make me feel small. Mom started crying. Not big sobs. Just the quiet kind where her chin trembles and she dabs at her eyes with whatever's in her hands, which in this case was a dish towel that probably cost $3 at a dollar store. And normally that would have worked on me. Normally I would have softened. I would have said sorry. I would have hugged her. I would have told her I didn't mean it, and let's just forget the whole thing. I've been doing that dance for 34 years. Step 1, discover something hurtful. Step 2, get angry. Step 3, watch mom cry. Step 4, apologize for having feelings. Step 5, go home and pretend everything's fine until the next time. Not this time. I need you to answer me, I said. Why? Dad sat down at the kitchen table. He rubbed his face with both hands, the way he does when he's trying to figure out how to say something without actually saying it. Finally, he looked up at me and said something I will never forget as long as I live. Because Chase is going to take care of us. And there it was. The truth. Stripped of all the euphemisms and justifications and estate planning jargon. They were investing in the son they expected a return from. Chase would move them into his big house in Franklin when they got old. Chase would manage their care. Chase would be the dutiful son who showed up at holidays with grandchildren and gratitude. I was the plumber. The guy who fixes the sink and goes home. Has Chase agreed to this? I asked. Dad looked at the table. We've discussed it. So Chase knows about the will. Silence. Chase knows, I said, not a question this time. More silence, which was its own answer. I set the papers on the counter. I looked at the sink. The wrench I'd been looking for was right there, sitting on top of a stack of expired coupons, right next to where the envelope had been. I could have finished the job in 5 minutes. Replaced the cartridge, tightened the valve, wiped everything down, and driven home. That's what old Austin would have done. Fix the sink, swallow the pain, call Paige on the way home and say, "You're not going to believe this," and then spend the next 3 weeks pretending it didn't bother me. Instead, I set the wrench down on the counter next to the will. I picked up my tool bag from the floor. I looked at my mom, who was still crying into her dish towel, and my dad, who was still sitting at the table looking at his hands. "The cartridge in the faucet is bad," I said. "You can get a replacement at any hardware store for about $12. YouTube's got a video that'll walk you through it. Good luck." And I walked out. I drove home in silence. Didn't turn on the radio. Didn't call Paige. Just drove with the windows down and my brain replaying every moment of my life through a new lens. Every birthday where Chase got the bigger present. Every holiday where Dad asked Chase about his career but never asked about my business. Every time Mom introduced us to her friends and said, "This is Chase, he's in business," and then gestured at me and said, "And this is Austin." Not Austin the business owner. Not Austin who built a company from nothing. Just Austin. Period. When I got home, Paige was sitting on the couch reading. She took one look at my face and set her book down. What happened? I told her everything. Every word, every look, every number on that document. She didn't interrupt. She didn't gasp or cry or say, "Oh my God," every 3 sentences the way people do in movies. She just listened. And when I was done, she sat quiet for about 30 seconds. Then she said 4 words. "We're done with them." And I know that sounds dramatic. I know there are people reading this who think that's an overreaction, that it's just money, that family is more important than inheritance. And maybe you're right. But here's the thing. It wasn't about the money. I didn't need their $740,000. I have my own money. I've been building my own security since I was 19 years old. It was about what the money represented. It was a scoreboard. A document that said in black and white, in legal language notarized and filed with an attorney, that my parents valued one of their sons at $740,000 and the other at whatever dusty box of junk they didn't feel like hauling to Goodwill. That was 8 months ago. I haven't spoken to my parents since. I haven't spoken to Chase since. And until about 2 weeks ago, none of them had tried to speak to me either. The first few weeks after I walked out of my parents' kitchen were rough. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. I threw myself into work, which is what I always do when I don't want to feel something, and Paige let me do it for about 10 days before she sat me down and said, "You can't outrun this with a pipe wrench. You need to actually deal with it." She was right. She's almost always right, which is both the best and most annoying thing about being married to her. I found a therapist, a guy named Grant, mid-50s, former military, the kind of guy who doesn't let you ramble for 45 minutes and then say, "And how does that make you feel?" He'd cut you off mid-sentence and say, "That's a story you're telling yourself. What actually happened?" I liked him immediately. He didn't treat me like I was broken. He treated me like I was a competent adult who'd been operating under some faulty assumptions about his own family for 3 decades. Grant helped me see something I hadn't been able to see on my own. The will wasn't the beginning. It was the end. The culmination of a lifetime of small decisions my parents had made that all pointed in the same direction. I was the low-maintenance kid, the one who didn't need help, didn't cause problems, didn't ask for anything. And because I never asked, they never offered. And because they never offered, they eventually forgot I might need something. Not money, not stuff, just the basic acknowledgement that I mattered as much as my brother. The thing about going no contact with your family is that it creates this weird vacuum in your life. Suddenly, all these little routines you didn't even know you had are gone. No more Sunday phone calls with Mom, where she'd talk for 20 minutes about her garden and then ask about Chase. No more dropping by Dad's garage to help him with whatever project he was pretending to work on. No more holidays where I'd sit at the end of the table and watch Chase hold court while I passed the rolls and wondered why I'd driven 2 hours for this. It's amazing how much time you get back when you stop performing for people who aren't watching. I poured that time into my business. I'd been running things lean for years, doing a lot of the scheduling and billing myself, and it was becoming a bottleneck. I finally did what I'd been putting off. I hired an office manager, a woman named Claire who'd been running operations for a mechanical contractor. Claire walked in on her first day, looked at my filing system, which was essentially a series of milk crates with labels made of masking tape, and said, "Oh, honey, we're going to fix this." Within 3 months, Claire had digitized everything, set up proper invoicing, and freed me up to focus on actually growing the business instead of drowning in paperwork. I started bidding on commercial jobs, a restaurant renovation downtown, a bathroom remodel for a dental office, then a new construction project for a local brewery that was expanding. Each job went well, and each one led to the next. By the end of January, 5 months after I'd walked out of my parents' house, my business had grown by about 30%. I hired 2 more plumbers. I bought a second work van. Paige and I sat down one Saturday morning and looked at our finances and realized we were in the best position we'd ever been in. Not rich, not rolling in cash, but solid. The kind of solid where you don't hold your breath when a bill shows up. Paige had her own thing going too. She'd been doing freelance graphic design for years, picking up projects here and there, and she decided to take a leap and go full-time. She set up a home office in our spare bedroom, built a website, and within a couple of months, she had more work than she could handle. We were becoming a team in a way we hadn't been before. 2 people building something together without the constant background noise of a family that made me feel like I was never quite enough. I started sleeping better. I didn't realize how poorly I'd been sleeping until I started sleeping well. All those years of low-grade anxiety about whether my parents were proud of me, whether I was measuring up, whether Chase was still the favorite. It had been sitting in my chest like a rock I'd gotten so used to carrying that I forgot it was there. And when I finally set it down, I felt like I'd lost 20 pounds overnight. Grant and I kept meeting every other week. We talked about boundaries, about how I'd spent my entire adult life proving myself to people who'd already made up their minds, about how my need to be useful, to be the guy who shows up and fixes things, wasn't just a work ethic. It was a survival strategy. If I'm useful, they'll love me. If I'm indispensable, they can't ignore me. Except they did ignore me. I was so useful I'd become invisible. A tool they reached for when something was broken and put back in the drawer when the job was done. I'm not telling you this so you feel sorry for me. I'm telling you because it matters for what happened next. Around February, I started hearing things through the grapevine. Paige's sister Kayla is married to a guy who works with someone who knows Tiffany's coworker. Small-town networking at its finest. The delivery system was ridiculous, but the intel was reliable. And the news was interesting. Chase was having money problems. Not the kind of problems where you cancel your streaming subscriptions and eat at home more. The kind of problems where the foundation starts cracking. Apparently, Chase's company had gone through a round of layoffs in November, and his position, whatever it actually was, had been restructured, which is corporate speak for, we don't need you, but we're going to pretend this was a strategic decision. He'd found another job, but it paid less, and less doesn't go very far when your lifestyle is built on more. I also heard that Tiffany wasn't handling the financial downgrade well. She'd been posting on social media about embracing simplicity and finding joy in less, which in my experience is what people do right before they max out a credit card. There were arguments, tensions. The big house in Franklin was apparently feeling a lot smaller when the bills were piling up on the quartz island. And here's where it gets really interesting. Remember how my parents said Chase was going to take care of them? That was the deal. $740,000 in exchange for future caregiving, future hosting, future gratitude. Well, Dad's health had started to slip. Nothing life-threatening, but his knee had gotten bad enough that he needed surgery, and Mom's arthritis was making it hard for her to keep up with the house. They needed help. Real, physical, show-up-and-do-things help. And Chase, from what I heard, was not showing up. He was too busy, too stressed, too far away, too something. The son they'd invested everything in was delivering roughly the same return as a savings bond in a recession. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a little satisfied by that. Not happy, not gleeful, but there's a certain grim satisfaction in watching the math not add up the way someone planned. They bet everything on one horse, and the horse was currently struggling to make his truck payment. Meanwhile, I was in the best shape of my life. Personally, professionally, emotionally. I had a therapist who was helping me understand myself better than I ever had. I had a wife who loved me without conditions. I had a business that was thriving because I'd built it with my own hands. I had employees who respected me because I treated them like people, not tools. I had friends, real ones, not the kind you keep because they're attached to family obligations. I had everything I needed, and none of it had come from my parents. Then, on a Wednesday night in late March, my phone rang. I looked at the screen and saw 2 words I hadn't seen in 8 months. Mom calling. I let it ring, watched it go to voicemail. Then I set the phone on the kitchen counter and stared at it like it was a grenade with the pin half out. Paige walked in, saw my face, saw the phone, and said, "Who?" "Mom." She leaned against the doorframe and crossed her arms. "You going to listen to it?" "I don't know." "Yes, you do." She was right. I was always going to listen to it. Not because I missed them, although honestly some small part of me did, but because I needed to know what had finally made them pick up the phone after 8 months of silence. 8 months of not calling. 8 months of not texting. 8 months of not driving 20 minutes across town to knock on their son's door and say, "Hey, we need to talk about that, Will." I played the voicemail on speaker. Mom's voice was shakier than I remembered. She sounded older somehow, like 8 months had aged her 5 years. "Austin, honey, it's Mom. I know it's been a while and I know things were said that probably shouldn't have been said, and I know you're upset, and I just really need to talk to you. Your father's knee surgery is coming up and we could really use some help around the house, and, well, there are some other things we should probably discuss. Please call me back. I love you." I replayed it twice, not because I missed anything, but because I wanted to make sure I'd heard what I thought I heard. And I had. There was no apology in that message. No acknowledgement of what they'd done. No, we were wrong. Just things were said, and you're upset, and we need help. Classic Lindsay Brennan playbook. Rewrite the conflict as a mutual misunderstanding. Frame my justified anger as me being emotional, and then slide the real ask in at the end like it's an afterthought. Oh, and by the way, we need someone to take care of us. How convenient that I'm a guy who fixes things. I didn't call back that night, or the next day, or the day after that. I talked to Grant about it at our next session. He listened to me lay out the whole situation, the voicemail, the knee surgery, Chase's financial problems, all of it. And then he asked me one question. "What do you actually want from this?" I thought about it for a long time, and the answer surprised me. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to punish them. I didn't even want the money. What I wanted was for them to say it. To acknowledge, out loud, in plain language, that they had treated me like I was less. That the will wasn't just an estate document, it was a verdict. And that they were wrong. "Okay," Grant said. "So what's your plan?" "I don't have one yet." "Yes, you do. Everyone in my life apparently knows me better than I know myself. Over the next week, I did something I probably should have done 8 months ago. I called a lawyer. Not because I was going to sue anyone, but because I wanted to understand exactly where I stood. My buddy Derek from high school had gone to law school and was now an estate attorney in Nashville. I called him up, told him the broad strokes, and asked if I could buy him lunch. We met at a barbecue place off Charlotte Avenue. I laid out what I'd seen in the will, and Derek listened while eating a truly impressive amount of brisket. Legally, he said, your parents can leave their estate to whoever they want. No obligation to split evenly. You don't have a claim. I know. That's not why I'm here. But here's what's interesting, he said. The down payment they gave Chase, the cruise they helped pay for, those gifts establish a pattern. And if your parents structured the entire estate around Chase being their caretaker, and Chase isn't actually doing that, then your parents have a problem. Chase has a problem, and none of it is your problem. I thanked Derek, paid for lunch, and drove home with my brain spinning. The phone calls from Mom kept coming, one every few days. Each voicemail a little more urgent than the last. Dad's surgery was in 2 weeks. The house needed winterizing. The gutters were full. The bathroom faucet was leaking now too. It was like my parents' entire house had decided to fall apart the moment I stopped being their free maintenance service. Then Chase called. First time in 8 months. I didn't answer, but his voicemail was a masterpiece of passive aggression. Hey man, it's Chase. Listen, Mom and Dad are really struggling, and I think it's pretty selfish that you've been ghosting them over some paperwork you weren't even supposed to see. They're old, Austin. They need their family. Call them back. And call me back too. We should talk. Selfish. He called me selfish. The guy who was getting everything called the guy who was getting nothing selfish for being upset about it. That's like a bank robber calling the security guard rude for trying to stop him. I showed Paige the voicemail. She listened to it once, shook her head, and said, he doesn't even realize he just proved your point. She was right. Chase's entire message was about what I should be doing for them. Not what they'd done to me. Not what the will said. Not what was fair. Just, you need to show up and be useful. Same script, different actor. I decided I would call Mom back. But I was going to do it on my terms. I wasn't going to show up at their house and fix their gutters and play the good son and pretend everything was fine. I was going to have a real conversation. A sit down, look them in the eye, no more dancing conversation. And I wanted Chase there too. Because this wasn't just between me and my parents. This was about all of us. The whole family system that had been humming along for decades with me at the bottom. I called Mom on a Saturday morning. She picked up on the first ring, which told me she'd been waiting. Austin. Oh, honey, I'm so glad you called. Your father and I have been so worried. Are you okay? We miss you so much. I'm fine, Mom. I want to talk. All of us. You, Dad, me, and Chase. At the house. There was a pause. Chase? Why does Chase need to be there? Because this involves all of us. Can you set it up for next Saturday? Another pause, longer this time. I could hear Dad's voice in the background, muffled, asking who was on the phone. I'll talk to your brother, she finally said. Saturday should work. Your father's surgery isn't until the following Monday, so he'll be here. Good. And Mom, I'm not coming to fix anything. I'm coming to talk. Silence. I'll see you Saturday, I said, and hung up. I spent the next week getting ready. Not rehearsing some big dramatic speech. Just getting clear in my own head about what I needed to say and what I needed to hear. Grant helped. Paige helped. Derek's legal context sat in the back of my mind like a safety net I hoped I wouldn't need. The night before the meeting, Paige and I sat on our back porch. It was April now, warm enough to be outside, and the sky was doing that thing where it goes from orange to purple in about 10 minutes. She reached over and took my hand. Whatever happens tomorrow, she said, you're coming home to me. And that's enough. I know. Do you, though? I squeezed her hand. Yeah, I do now. Saturday morning. I put on a clean shirt, decent jeans, and my good boots. Not to impress anyone, just to feel like myself. Solid. Put together. Paige held my face in both hands before I left and said, don't you dare apologize for having feelings. I got in my truck and drove to my parents' house. Chase's truck was already in the driveway. I parked behind it, took a deep breath, and walked up to the front door. I didn't knock. I just walked in, because I wasn't a guest. I was their son, whether they treated me like one or not. They were all in the living room. Dad in his recliner with his bad knee propped up. Mom on the couch with her hands folded. Chase standing by the fireplace with his arms crossed, looking like a guy who thought he was about to win an argument he didn't realize he'd already lost. Nobody said hello. I sat down in the chair by the window and looked at all three of them. Somebody want to start? Chase jumped in first. Of course he did. Yeah, I'll start. You've been acting like a child for 8 months, Austin. Mom and Dad are dealing with real problems and you're pouting because you didn't like what was in a piece of paper. Grow up. I let that sit for a second. Then I said, is that what they told you? That I'm pouting? That's what it looks like from where I'm standing. You're standing in a house that's going to be yours, I said, along with $740,000 and a piece of property in Cookville. So maybe where you're standing isn't the most objective vantage point. Chase's jaw shifted. He glanced at Dad. Dad was staring at the floor. Did you know about the will? I asked Chase directly. He didn't answer right away, which was an answer. Chase, did you know? Yeah, he said. I knew. Dad and I talked about it. When? Last summer. Before it was finalized. And you didn't think to bring it up with me? It wasn't my place. It wasn't your place, I repeated. But it was your place to take the money. Mom leaned forward. Austin, your father and I made that decision for practical reasons. Chase agreed to be our primary caretaker when the time comes. That's a significant commitment, and we felt it was fair to reflect that in the estate plan. I nodded slowly. Okay, so let me ask you something, Mom. In the last 8 months, how many times has Chase come over to help with the house? Silence. How many times has Chase driven down from Franklin to help Dad prepare for surgery? To clean the gutters? To fix the bathroom faucet? To do any of the things I used to do for free every single week, without being asked and without being included in any estate plan? Mom's chin started trembling. Dad was still staring at the floor. Chase shifted his weight. I'll answer for you, I said. Based on what I've heard, and I've heard plenty, Chase has been over here maybe 3 times since September. 3 times in 8 months. And 2 of those were holidays he had to show up to anyway. Chase's face went red. I've been going through a tough time. I lost my job Tiffany and I are dealing with. I didn't ask about your problems, Chase. I asked about your promise. $740,000 in exchange for taking care of Mom and Dad. The down payment. The cruise. And now that the obligation is real, you're too busy. The room went dead quiet. The faucet in the kitchen was still dripping. Nobody had fixed it. I turned to my dad. He still hadn't looked up. Dad, look at me. He looked up. His eyes were wet. I don't think I'd ever seen my father's eyes wet before. Not at funerals, not at weddings, not ever. Why? I said. Forget the estate plan. Forget the money. Just tell me why. Why was it always Chase? Why was I the afterthought? What did I do? Dad's mouth opened and closed. He looked like a man who'd been carrying something for 30 years and had just realized he couldn't hold it anymore. You didn't do anything, he said. His voice was rough. You were always so capable, Austin. You figured things out on your own. You didn't need us the way Chase did. And somewhere along the way, your mother and I confused not needing us with not wanting us. We leaned toward the one who seemed to need us more. That's not fair, I said. I know. I needed you. I just showed it differently. I showed it by coming over here every week. By calling Mom every Sunday. By showing up to every holiday, even though I felt invisible. That was me trying. And you didn't see it. Mom was fully crying now. Not the performative crying from 8 months ago. Real crying. Dad wiped his eyes. I see it now. Then I need you to say it. Out loud. That what you did was wrong. He took a shaky breath. What we did was wrong. The will was wrong. The way we treated you. All of it was wrong. And I'm sorry, Austin. I'm sorry I made you feel like you mattered less. Mom managed. I'm so sorry. I was afraid to bring it up because I thought you'd never forgive us. I'm not interested in never forgiving you, I said. I'm interested in you doing something about it. I turned to Chase. He looked smaller somehow. Not physically, just in the way a person looks when the narrative they've been living inside suddenly doesn't fit anymore. You took the deal, I said. You knew they were cutting me out, and you didn't say a word. I didn't think. Don't say it wasn't your place. You're my brother. It was absolutely your place. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then his eyes got red and his voice cracked. You're right. It was crappy, and I should have said something. I'm sorry. I believed him. Not because the words were perfect, but because he looked like a guy who just realized the floor he'd been standing on was made of glass. We talked for another 2 hours. More honestly than my family had ever talked about anything. Dad agreed to revise the will to include me equally, not because I demanded money, but because he said it was the right thing to do. Mom agreed to start actually asking about my life instead of just my skills with a wrench. Chase and I agreed to start fresh. I didn't fix the faucet that day. I told Dad I'd come back the following week and do it, and I did. But that time, he sat in the kitchen with me while I worked. He handed me tools. He asked about my business, what my plans were, whether I was happy. My father asked me if I was happy. I'm 34 years old, and that was the first time. It's been about 2 months since that Saturday. Things aren't perfect. They're never going to be perfect, and anyone who tells you family reconciliation is a light switch is selling something. But they're better. Dad had his surgery, and Paige and I helped during the recovery. So did Chase. We were both there, taking shifts, bringing food, doing the small stuff that families are supposed to do. Not because of a contract in an envelope, because it was right. My business just landed its biggest contract yet. A commercial plumbing project for a new apartment complex on the west side of Knoxville. Paige's design business is booming. We're talking about a bigger house, maybe out toward Maryville where there's more land and the air smells like pine instead of interstate. Last weekend, Dad came to my shop. He'd never been to my shop. In 15 years of me running a business, my father had never once set foot in the place where I work. He looked at the vans and the tool racks and the whiteboard where we schedule jobs. Then he looked at me and said, "You built all this?" "Yeah, Dad, I built all this." He nodded. And then he said something that hit me harder than any sentence in any will ever could. "I'm proud of you, son." I should have said it a long time ago. So that's my story. I found an envelope in a junk drawer that told me my parents had a price tag for each of their sons, and mine was marked clearance. I walked out. I rebuilt. And when they finally called, I didn't come back with anger or demands. I came back with one question. Why? And the answer, painful as it was, turned out to be the beginning of something better. If you're the kid in your family who always got less even though you gave more, I want you to know something. Your worth is not determined by the people who couldn't see it. Build your own table. And if they ever want a seat at it, make sure they bring something other than excuses. I've got a faucet to fix.